back to The Unleashing. I'm your host, Jared Beeler. Today I want to talk about winning souls and the art of witnessing. We discuss all kinds of stuff all the time, but this is one of the real important parts of being a Christian, witnessing to others and letting them know about Jesus. It's what we're called to do as Christians, not sit in pews and listen to the same rhetoric over and over again, but to take what we've heard and learned and get out there and talk to others. I know this is a real struggle for a lot of people, and a lot of you find yourself, Jared, or I just don't know how to say it to people. I'm not good at talking to others, or I don't know how to do it, and I'm scared. And there's all kinds of different reasons and stuff like that. I know it's difficult and growing up, but really it's kind of something that you get into and you find your own way to do it. My mom, she goes out in the streets and she talks to people, and she says that it's really nice because they're not afraid of her because she's older. She's in her 60s, and because of that, she says she can walk right up to them and talk to them about Jesus, and she just asks them bluntly, and it's really cool that she can do that and stuff. As for me, if I walked to some people and was like, let me tell you about Jesus, they'd probably grab their children and be like, you're scaring us, and they would run away, So I have to take different approaches and stuff like that. But they don't want to talk about just some different ideas and how to do it and how I like to do it and stuff. And there are a couple different approaches, direct and indirect. Direct approach is something along the lines of this. I need your boot, your jacket, and your soul. Come with me if you want to live. While indirect is more than the lines, let me tell you a little story real fast. When I was younger, I moved down to Colorado, and there was a swimming pool out behind our house, just an old one that got fixed up, right? And this swimming pool was just regular water from outside, and I found out that my little brother didn't want to swim in it, and he was on some kick about chlorine or something like that, right? So I wanted him to swim in there so we could splash around, and I could splash him and all kinds of other stuff and cause trouble. But anyways, I couldn't get him to go in there, and my sister was talking about it, so I devised a plan, and I made sure my brother was in the other room and he could hear me, and I started talking to my sister loud, and I was like, yeah, some people freak out about chlorine and stuff like that. There's too much in the water, it's going to cause skin damage or whatever I was saying, but really there's not enough in there to matter, and you can always use lotion and stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of went off like that, and I'm like, yeah, it's stupid. And my little brother listened to it in the other room, and because of that, he was like, oh, well, chlorine's not so bad. But he had to figure it out for himself, right? So I was indirectly speaking to him, acting like I was talking to my sister, but I wasn't talking to my sister at all. I was telling my little brother. And that same day, we were all splashing around the pool and having a good old time. So that's like an example of indirect speaking. And another thing with indirect speaking that I like about it is it doesn't freak people out so much when you go directly towards them and tell them, it's the same goal as directly speaking. You want to tell them about Jesus because you're looking out for them and stuff, and but they'll get nervous, and on the spot they'll turn away or put up defenses and things like that. Whereas indirect, you can be talking about it almost, and in a way a lot of times in a third person, and they're completely safe talking to you while you're the Christian, and at the same time you're looking out for them and try to win their soul to Jesus, And so that's kind of an approach I like to use when I do it, and there's lots of different ways. But it's something that you have to be smart about and think about each person, and no two people are the same, Matthew 10:16, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves, be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. It means, you got to be careful of the world and everything like that, but in the King James, the word wise, it is something that you want to think about and how you're gonna plan it out and stuff like that. And there's definitely some certain wisdom to doing it. I'm gonna give you guys some scenarios and things like that to think over here, and maybe you can use some of these to your advantage. And you can totally throw me out there too. Let's say you're at work with somebody and they're talking, or you're not talking at all, and you're looking out the window and they're like, "Hey man, what are you thinking about, Dave?" Or whatever your name is that might be listening to this right now. Oh, just some stuff I've seen on the this channel I watch on YouTube. Oh yeah, what's it about? Oh, this channel's called The Unleashing, and he talks about all kinds of different things, but it really makes you think about some stuff. Oh yeah, what kind of stuff? Well, it's a lot of biblical things and stuff like that, but it's pretty intriguing, and it really lines up with the way things are, and scientifically and things like that. What do you mean scientifically? Oh, well, for instance, I've heard him say things like, look at the population of the Earth, and look at its doubling rate. In 1965, we were about 3.5 billion people worldwide. In the 1900s, I think we're around 2. You go back to the time of Jesus, we're at 200 million people worldwide, right? Well, according to evolution, we started about 1 million years ago. But if you look at the rate at which we double and stuff like that, from what I've heard, that would put about 6 people per square inch all over the planet. However, it really lines up with the story of Noah and 8 people getting off the ark, which would be 4,000 years ago. And man, that makes a lot of sense for that reason. Before they even get a chance to say anything, hit them with something else at the same time. Do you know there's over 200 cities under the Mediterranean Sea? No, I didn't know that. Yeah, there really is. It's pretty crazy. There's over 200 of them that they have documented that they found. It's about 3 miles deep in most places there, all over the place, including where those cities are. Wow, no, that's pretty crazy. I was doing some research and I found out that if all the ice caps melted, it would only raise us about 11 feet. Now, Florida and things like that would be gone, but and a lot of shorelines, but it definitely wouldn't increase any miles or anything like that. Where do you suppose all that water came from that covered those cities? Because people were living down there. Didn't seem too long ago, too, where that water came from. Gee, man, no, I haven't really thought about it. Russia was digging around a few years ago, and they dug down under the crust, and they found a huge amount of water, up to 100 miles in width in certain places, and they said there's more water under the crust than there is on top of the planet itself. And there's only one other story that I know of around the world that happened, and that's in the Bible when it says the water came out of the crust, and there was more of it coming out, and talking about the story of Noah than there was coming down from the sky. It's definitely something to think about, and that would explain where all the water came from. Wow, man, that's pretty interesting. Right then, right there, what you've done is you've just created a scenario where they have to think about that kind of stuff, because they are going to be thinking about it. It's interesting. People want to have answers and stuff like that. And nowadays, what we deal with the most is your Thomas situations. I won't believe Jesus unless I can put my finger in his hand and in his side. Jesus shows up and he talks to Thomas and he says, Thomas, put your finger in my hand, put it in my side. And he goes, Lord, I believe. He's like, yes, you believe because you've seen. But what about those who believe that haven't? Greater is their faith, And the point is yeah, there's people out there and greater is their faith if they can take it, just the story, and do it. Are the people that want to have more proof and stuff like that any less love, like Thomas? No, absolutely not. But it takes a different kind of scenario to get those people's attention, And God loves them just as much too. And in the scientific community we have now, where before there was flat earth nonsense that was only distracting people and making people dumber by the minute, there was evolution and the war between there's God or there's evolution. It's taken billions of years and we came from nothing, or it was perfectly created and it matches up perfectly. And there's one thing after another, and the research has been done. I find it interesting, and a lot of people have forgotten about it. The work done by Kent Hovind and other things like that. I don't agree with Kent Hovind's idea of post-tribulation, and I believe that he got some of that when he went to jail, because you get into an attitude of, well, I'm suffering, so that means everybody's going to suffer. It's a post-tribulation. No, it's not, and it doesn't line up like that at all. All right? Trey Smith has done some work that's pretty good, and you can see some of the animal footage, like armadillos the size of Volkswagens, eagle heads the size of Marahute off of Rescuers Down Under, just all kinds of different things. And these animals lived alongside with dinosaurs, and not to mention the dinosaur figurines out of South America and stuff like that, where there's hundreds of thousands of them where people are riding on dinosaurs, all right? And the short lifespan, all right? And then you look at reptiles that never stop growing their entire life, and you put them in an oxygen-enriched environment like before the flood, how it was. because people are living 900 years and you have yourself dinosaurs living alongside of people. There's all kinds of interesting facts like this that you can bring up in a conversation to make people think in your quest to win their soul, all right? They started looking into the sun back in the mid-1800s. They know it loses at a steady rate 5 miles in diameter from burn-off rate that comes from the sun. Well, we're 92 million miles from the sun. If you were to go back just 20 million years, all right, we would be in the sun. How big can the expansion go before we're in some serious global warming? Look at Venus, for instance. It's I think it's at 68 mil, and look how trash it is. So it's just a little bit closer, all right. And we're supposed to be billions of years, all right. That's going to throw huge wrenches into it. The rotation of the Earth slowing down, all right. We lose a few seconds or whatever every single year. But if you go back as far as they say, well, we're spinning so fast that it would uproot the trees and throw them into outer space from the centrifugal force, okay? So that's not going to be a comfortable environment to live in. And the moon's been pulling away at the same time, all right? When you look at this, and if you go back and the moon would be crashed into us, but even scientists and all of them admit that you had to have the moon here for life to be here in the first place, okay? When you calculate this stuff in, it starts to be like, wow, man, that's crazy. There really is some proof that it's not that long ago that this happened. You guys have heard me talk about aliens and stuff like that. So when they start well, maybe aliens planted us here crap, you can get into the whole point of them being demonic beings, and they'll line up with that. They can totally be rebuked. The government keeping them a secret. It's all in Satanism and stuff like that, and the connection with it every time with Satanism. You guys have heard some of the stories that I've talked about before. The one Satanist on his deathbed, and he's at death's door, and all of a sudden Greys show up in the hospital room, and he's like, whoa, 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 what's happening here? This isn't supposed to be happening. And they were coming for him because they were demonic. They were demonic beings, you know. Or the other story where there was the cow mutilation, and the farmer went over to see the cow and stuff like that, and he comes back and he's just totally like zoned out. He'd been had some work done to him on his head, and the wife goes out there and she's like, I've never seen a cow like that. It's been totally folded inside out. And but when he comes back, he tells her it was a group of Satanists, and we got to go bury the cow. Out of all the things that the aliens could have put on his head, because that's what it was, that folded, and they put Satanists into it, all right? There's a huge correlation between Satanism and aliens and stuff like that, and them being demonic beings, and why when you call it the name of Jesus, they run for their lives, okay? And why people that get saved who have been in abductions their whole life, and they become Christians, boom, abductions stop instantly, and it's case over and done with for that, you know? So, I mean, there's just one thing after another that points to that. There was these guys that wrote this book back in I think it was 2004, 2003, and there's some researchers, and they wanted to figure out where the moon came from, and it was interesting. I got to listen to them on Coast to Coast, but they wrote a book called Who Built the Moon, and they went through all the mathematics of it, and as they go through it, they talk, and they're like, it was the craziest thing. It was almost like the moon was talking to us. Whoever put the moon there was almost telling us, and they knew that we would find it right at this time from the numbers, the distance from the moon, its correlation, the size of the sun, and everything like that. It's been perfectly lined up, and it was as if it was talking to us from the future or somewhere to let us know that. And they're like, at the very end, they came up, there is only 3 possible conclusions, and only 3 out of the whole thing from the numbers, and it's a thick book. They did every kind of research you could think of, and they go, there is only 3 possibilities, and we're open to all 3, but we've kind of chosen one over the other. And the first one was God put it there, all right? Second, aliens from from a distant galaxy put it there. Now, aliens aren't in it. There are no aliens. God sent his only begotten Son to Earth, and I don't believe in other life. But what about bacteria on Mars or something like that? Well, that was an oasis for Nephilim and fallen angels and other things like that, and there's some people up there right now anyways on Mars. So if you're going to find microbes and stuff like that, I wouldn't be surprised. But as for actual human beings, we were created in God's image? No, it's just us, all right? Could he make some other stuff? Yeah, absolutely. Will he? Maybe so. That's beyond now. But for right now, as far as I know, absolutely not. It's just us. But and then the one that they picked out of the 3 was we put it there from the future, which of course is a gigantic paradox. We couldn't have put it there if we weren't here in the first place, and by bringing it back in time to create us, it creates a loophole that spins around, and that's the one that they picked, which is really silly. The simple answer is that God put it there, and he wanted us to notice it and see the correlation with the sun, and to show his divine creation that he's created, because the heavens declare his glory, and it's truly amazing. There's planets that spin in the opposite direction. I think Venus and Uranus do as well. And it's really neat, because if it was a spinning explosion, that, like scientists say from evolution, everything would be spinning in the same direction all over, and all the subsidiary things would be spinning in the same direction, but there's not. There's things spinning in the opposite direction and stuff. It's like, well, maybe asteroids hit Venus and it started spinning the other way. Yeah, sure, but that doesn't do anything for Uranus. It's a gas giant. Asteroids crashing into it aren't going to change the spin. It's not going to do anything. So, I mean, there's a number of things that are really interesting to point out, you know. And there's nothing wrong with that at the same time, because, like I say, in a scientific community and things like that, people think that science and their teachers in college and everything has disproved God, and only it's something completely different. They've picked and chosen what they talk about to keep it a secret, and so that people don't know. But you can use the actual science to show and prove that God exists, and when they do that, it's really neat, because you can help win people over that maybe that's all they needed, a little kickstart to help them believe that God's real. So it's pretty cool, and a lot of times that works to help people. So, but witnessing to people, let me just put it this way: Matthew 10:8. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely you have received, freely give. And that's the point, is that it's not a money-making operation. It never has been. You guys have heard me talk 1,000 times about tithes. It was done away with. It had nothing to do with us, especially at all, or the church. It was for the Jews when they were taking care of the temple, and the Levites. And the temple is no longer needed, because Jesus dwells in us now. We are the temple. And the word church is the called out ones. So, you'll run into those people that are like, well, I don't want anything to do with the church. And I don't blame them. I really don't want anything to do with it either, because, it's a bunch of people just sitting in there listening to the same thing over and over again, never growing their relationship, and never getting out there and graduating to go tell people about Jesus, which is what the whole point is. We're all called to do that, every single one of us. And you start with one person at a time, and then you go to the next, and you go to the next, and you go to the next. And sometimes we don't finish what we started, but we're all a team. And when one person plants the seeds, it'll last forever, and somebody else might come along that says something else in a different angle, which helps push them up and get them saved. Because ultimately, what we want is for these people to make it to heaven, and know peace and love, and get out of this world, because this world's hurt everybody, including them, every single one of them. And it's tough knocks out there. It's a hard place, and we all want people to find Jesus, especially those that we care about. Let's do something real fast. I'm going to take you guys to the future, and yeah, you heard that right. I'm going to take every single person listening to this channel right now to the future. I want to show you something really quick. All right, we're going to kind of take our own individual ships, but here we go. Brace yourself. I want you to think about that person that you care about, or that you love, that isn't saved, and I want you to blast off with me right now. I'll show you where we're going. Boom. Okay, we've just gone to the future, right? We're some years ahead right now, and surprise, we're in hell, okay? Don't worry about it. You're not going to be on fire or anything like that. You have a new body, you're saved, and you're totally fine. And that person you were thinking of, you can see him out there burning in the fire. Let's go grab him out of there real fast and have a quick talk with him. You're only going to get one shot at this, okay? You've pulled him out and you're talking to him. What do they say? Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. Thank you for this. I need to get out of this flame for a second. This is killing me. What are you doing here, all right? I'm here to talk to you, and there's a chance that I could save you. Oh my gosh, what do I have to do? I'm going to go back in time, and I'm going to talk to you and get through to you. What do I have to say? Man, say anything that you have to. I remember how stubborn you were. How can I get through to you? Do you think that really matters? Look at me. I'm burning alive here forever. Say what you have to. Well, what about your significant other that would be uncomfortable with this hearing about? Do you think that matters? Look where I am. I'm burning alive. Man, what if you're uncomfortable? Do you think that matters? I'm burning alive. All right? You do whatever you have to, and you say it any way that you can, even if you have to be sneaky, to get me out of this place because I cannot live here another second. This is the worst thing I've ever experienced. All right? I'm going to do whatever I can. I care about you. Do it, please. I need you to do this. Boom. You're out of there. And now we're back. And we're right here in this time, okay? And that's a future. That's a real future that people that we don't get to are going to be experiencing, because hell is real and so is the suffering that happens with it, all right? And this is your chance right now to make a difference so that that doesn't happen to that person. It is absolutely life and death, and it is absolutely for eternity, okay? We have to do every single thing that we can. Again, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We have to be cunning in this in every single way, all right? The ultimate goal is to save them, even if they don't think they want to be saved right now. In the future, you've already talked to them. They absolutely need to be saved and want to be saved. It's the most serious thing you could possibly be dealing with, okay? So think about what you're going to say and how you're going to do it and plan it out, and there's nothing wrong with that, and work with this person. And don't get upset when you can't get through to them at one time. These things take time. Winning people over is not easy. It's not overnight. We don't usually get to do it in huge mass groups, even though we'd like to. It's one person at a time, which is why we're all called to do it, because if we're all doing it like we were supposed to, instead of sitting in pews not telling anybody, then we would have been able to get to a lot more people, okay? So we do one person at a time and we keep going. And when you get better, you might be able to start handling more than a time, all right? But that is our goal as Christians. We want to talk to people and we talk to others. And indirectly speaking, it's a personal one that I really like to use. You can talk to them right there to their face, tell them about how much God loves them and stuff like that, without pushing on them so much. You need to turn right now, because a lot of times that will scare them away. And even though they do need to turn right now because their time is running out, talk about other things. There's things lining up. Oh yeah, what kind of things? Well, I've seen some interesting stuff, and have you ever heard the Malachi prophecy? No, I haven't. Well, it said there'd be 112 popes, and this was back in 1100, and all the popes that have been up, their coat of arms and everything, they've matched up perfectly with this prophecy. Oh really? Yeah, and the 112th is supposedly the last, and it sounds like Jesus comes back at the end and totally destroys the whole thing. It's the end of the world. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it is pretty interesting, because the 112th is the one that we have right now. Whoa, you don't say. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's pretty crazy, because it says that he's going to come back and judge, and there's a chance that it could be the Pope that we have here. Really? Wow, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I've heard in the Catholic Church that they would never let a Jesuit become a pope. They're a military faction that wanted to take over the world, and this is also the very first Jesuit. Wow, that is pretty crazy. Yeah, it is. And there's this correlation from Revelation chapter 17 that really lines up with it when John's taken to the future. And these people won't know this, but it's intriguing to listen to, okay? So you keep talking and you say, yeah, there's 8 kings, and the 8th is the final, the false prophet that works with the Antichrist, right? Well, that is interesting. And at the end of Revelations, he's still alive, and he gets tossed in the lake of fire, so he hasn't died of old age or anything like that. Well, that's pretty interesting too. Yeah, in 1929, this thing called the Lantern Treaty gave the Pope's kingship. And when you look at that lineup, the 8th one is the one we have right now. Really? Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And it's also the 112th. So it lines up from a completely separate prophecy. Wow, that is crazy. Well, if you look at his age and he's 80 and he doesn't die of old age, it seems like stuff's got to take place pretty fast, because he's getting up there. He's already 80 years old, and the tribulation's 7 years, and he makes it to the end of that. Wow, that's pretty interesting. You start talking like that, okay? You're not putting that person on the spot. You're telling them absolute truth with things that are interesting and taking place, and you show them the correlation with what's happening in the world and the importance of it, and you leave a trail behind, okay? Some of the first seals that look like a white rider comes out. Most people think it's the Antichrist, and after that is a red rider on this horse, on this second seal, and it looks like war, like a World War III. And then right after is this black horse, and it says it takes a day's wage, or what would have been a day's wage back then, a penny or whatever, for a loaf of bread. It sounds like a huge hyperinflation, and it's worldwide. Look what's happening right now at the same time that this Pope's in here, and the Malachi prophecy that said it'd be the end. There's wars going on. It looks like we could be at World War III, and we're also on the brink of economic collapse worldwide, which is why they want to change things up in the currency and stuff like that, which is interesting because a digital currency is what it looks like happens during the Antichrist's reign. Wow, that's really interesting stuff. See, what you've done is you've just got their mind working, and you've taken them into the reality of this all being real, while at the same time not putting the pressure of everything right on at time, because you're leaving seeds and steps and a path for them to follow. Because when they're following it themselves, just the same way that my little brother decided to jump in the pool, when they figure it out for themselves, it's a lot more bound to stick. And the government knows that when they started using things like the Van Allen belt, all right? And tricking people into flat earth nonsense, all right, to see how duped they could be, all right? It's another one of the things when people start thinking that they're figuring themselves out because they watched a NASA slip up and say, yeah, we can't make it through the Van Allen belt. Oopsie. Which is total nonsense, because we have and we do. Then people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so smart, look what I've discovered, all right? But it's the same way. If you let people discover stuff for themselves and think about it themselves, they're a lot more bound to keep thinking about it and looking into it, because the whole point is to save as many people as possible. And there's a number of things that you can look into, and you can bring up that points to the reality of the whole thing, and people look right over. Let me tell you guys a quick story. I was in college back I can't think of what year it was. I think it was 2012 during summer. I was taking a summer class, and it was ancient history. It was really cool. They were talking about Spartans and stuff like that. And I take a biblical stance on everything, as you know, but I'm going to show you how the truth is out there in front of everybody, but sometimes it takes you to point that truth out, okay? So we're watching these slides, and he's talking about the island of Crete and this city with these huge rocks, and there's no wall around it, and they don't know who built it, and they've never been able to discover it, right? So during the speech that the professor is giving, he's talking about, and they've never been able to find it. So a few slides continue on, and I stop him in the middle of the class, and everybody's listening but kind of half asleep. I'm like, what is that? And there's a picture of a city on the side, an ancient one on the side of the Mediterranean. And the city had walls around it, and there was a bluff up above it where the castle was, and the only way to get up there was through the city up this bluff, because it was cliffs on all the other side, and there was no walls around this castle up on top. And I go, what is that? And the teacher tells me what I just said, I'm like, don't you think that's interesting that it doesn't have walls around the castle, but only the city does? He's like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, how many cities are in the Mediterranean Sea that we know about? He's like, oh, over 200. I'm like, exactly. All right. And they're at the bottom of the ocean. And just like that city that's below that bluff right there, look at it. Now, the island of Crete and the walls that they can't figure out, what if that's the bluff and the city's underneath it? And boof, right over everybody's head. Nobody even understood what I just did. Just discovered the whole point of it. The city is underneath the water. It's down there at the bottom, and that's probably where the walls are, okay? But it's that biblical point of view that makes the discoveries like that, because when you plug that in, all your answers become clear, and when you take out the evolutionary idea and stuff like that leaves questions and philosophy and nonsense, that leaves people not knowing anything, the biblical point of view stands tried and true every single time. That is the only way that any of this works out, okay? And with the timeline, the shortness of the whole thing, like I say, just looking at the population and the doubling rate from it and stuff like that, as little as Jesus' time, our population was only at 200 million people worldwide, and we're at 8 billion right now. You cannot go back that far. It lines up with Noah's timeline, which is why there is a cultural history of 8 people getting off of an ark or a boat all over the world, spread out, because that's where it came from. And there's a number of different things, of course, that I can keep talking on. But the point is that you can use this stuff to talk to people and to witness to them. And there's a number of different ideas, but it's very important, and we have to keep it up. And everybody's called to do it that's a Christian, young or great, and it is good to know your Bible and stuff, so you can use this in reference and stuff like that. But I really hope this helps and gets the point across of the importance of witnessing and some different techniques. And of course, I'm always happy to throw some ideas out there if you have any questions on how you can do it and stuff like that. But If you're like my mom and you want a direct approach and you're harmless around people and they like to listen to you, yeah, that's totally fine. It's your own custom design. Or maybe it's like me where you're too intimidating for some reason and small children are crying and their parents are like, no, keep him away. He's talking about Jesus. The indirect approach might be a better choice for you. So some different options and things like that. But absolutely, we all try, and sometimes I don't get through, and other times I do. And it always feels really nice when you leave something with somebody and you can see them coming along, and it grows. It's an incredible feeling to know that that person, even if they never saw you again, you know that they're going to be happy and they're going to be with Jesus, and you're doing what you're supposed to because it's a selfless act. All of it's selfless, and of course that is the pillars of honor, and that means everything. You're a Christian, you're leaving an example. So I'll leave it at that. God bless. I'll catch you next time on the Elation. Bye.